it
It
says.
shows that we are live. It shows it on your end.
It shows it on my end as well.
Right on. Let me check it on the YouTube end. Make sure everything's good over here. Let's see here. Because there's always like a slight delay. So right now people can hear us, but I can't hear us. Let's see here. 1 second. Does it show we're live? It does. We are live. Okay. Dan Richards of Dedunking. Thank you so much for coming on with me today.
Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, you have been taking things by storm. To anyone that's not familiar with Dan Richards here, he has a YouTube channel called Dedunking, and you've been making all kinds of videos. So you are this guy in this realm that I consider to be the most sane out of anybody. You're a skeptic. You don't agree with everything that I say. You've done some debunk videos on me. But you also are so good-spirited about it. And you also identify and will say, hey, oh, wait a second. Oh, no, he has a thought on this that's actually true. And you're like this guy that's been kind of like in the middle in like the most delightful way imaginable. It's like a breath of fresh air because I'm learning all kinds of things from you. And you're doing things right because all the archaeologists were warming up to you and loving you. And then as soon as you share a few things that contradicts things that say Flint Dibble had shared, now they're all wildly against you and talking about you all the time. So you're doing something right, my friend. So I will tell everybody, well, why don't you first just introduce yourself? I know you're a fellow veteran. One thing I love about you, you're an electrician by trade, correct?
Yes. I haven't done that for since 2008 when the housing market collapsed. I quit doing that. But yeah, that's what I did for a long time. And I'm a single dad, and now I make YouTube videos and sell stuff on the eBays.
Right on. What brought you into the interest of ancient civilizations?
Well, when I was in fourth grade, of all things, my art teacher had like an Egypt day for a reward, and I was just so fascinated with like this mixture of spiritualism with like this real practical. I mean, these guys did some amazing stuff. So combining those two things, I really was fascinated at a young age, and then I got into Graham Hancock. I had Fingerprints of the Gods pre-ordered from Hastings before I had read Sign and the Seal, and so I've been into this stuff for a long time. And when I finally got a chance to watch Ancient Apocalypse, because my son's a teenager now and doesn't really need his dad in his life as much, right? So I sat down and watched Ancient Apocalypse and then watched some of the debunking videos, and I was like, well, wait a minute, and decided to make a video addressing some of the stuff Milo Rossi, Mini Minuteman, said. And well, here we are.
I'm pretty sure I'm on his list. He made a video called The Conspiracy Pipeline, and I don't feel he represented me very well. I want to talk to him.
Yeah, there's a lot of that whole social angle of this, where they try to intertwine the politics with all of this stuff, is kind of frustrating, because it makes it where they come out and they say, well, we got the right answers, we've got the evidence on our side, and then immediately it shifts into, oh, by the way, this guy hangs out with unsavory people. So what in the hell is this?
Right.
let's have a conversation.
And you and I should have a conversation about this, because did you have any idea of just how crazy this field was? Because I never would have imagined just how divisive and nasty things are. People have differences of opinion. Like, I cannot believe how visceral it gets.
Oh, it's insane. I really thought that I was putting my toes into a sphere that was safe, like that there's going to be some people arguing with each other as their debunkings, but it's not like I had no idea that I was going to be called a white supremacist and all this kinds of crazy stuff for it. That just blew my mind. I'm like, well, what does that have to do with anything? It has nothing to do with it. But immediately then, the rabbit holes, the pipeline seems to be on their side and in their head. It's like they've got this idea of how things go down, but it's like, man, I cannot think of one person on the entire planet that was like, man, I had no problem with other races, but then I heard about Atlantis and decided it must have been white people. So fuck, let me get some sheets, and it just doesn't happen like that. But they'd like to make it seem that that's what we do. It's absurd.
Yeah, that's the thing. So anyone watching, let me first say hello to Flint Dibble, because he's indeed watching this. If you follow him on social media, he had watched my video and put out a tweet before locking his account saying that Jimmy's going to be talking about this, and he's associating me with being a Nazi, which is so upsetting. So a lot of people don't understand that when it came to Graham Hancock on the debate with Flint Dibble, and he really wanted to hold him accountable for the things that Flint had said. A lot of people don't realize just how much more there is to that story. I experienced it firsthand. A lot of people don't realize just how badly Flint lied through his teeth on that podcast to try to cover up his accusations of association, I should say, with Graham Hancock being a racist, white supremacist, pushing, Nazism and stuff like that. It was way worse than he realized. And Graham actually, I thought, showed him a lot of grace on that podcast because, like, for example, I had made a tweet, which I know you had seen. Remember, like last September, I had went to Baalbek, Lebanon. I come home a few weeks later, and I'm exploring the topic of the swastikas being found, on 5 continents around the world, that it is a prehistoric symbol dating back 10,000 years. And then if you study into the Nazis, they were really, really into archaeology. This is verifiable. This is documented history that they had a real passion for it. And that makes me wonder why. So I go to Baalbek at this spectacular site that I think is the most compelling example of a lost ancient advanced civilization. If there's such a thing, I think Baalbek is the place because it clearly was not, the foundations of which I should say were not constructed by the Romans, as I will present in my next video. And I made a tweet with a picture of a swastika with the Temple of Jupiter or the Temple of Bacchus, in the background. And I said, did Hitler know something? Did Hitler and the Nazis know something that we don't? And it was a sincere question in the context of it being a prehistoric symbol. And Flint literally blasted me for saying that he is spreading disgusting Nazism. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, don't put my name with Nazis. I'd go back in time. I'd shoot Hitler myself. Like, don't put me in that bucket. I was a soldier. Like, I volunteered for Iraq thinking that, Saddam Hussein was the modern day Nazi. Because, of course, I bought into all the 9/11 and all this other stuff that we don't need to get into that right now. But so I know what it's like to have people, associate with something something so visceral that's meant to destroy you. That way, if you Google Jimmy Corsetti, you'll see something about Nazism or something. So that was happening with Graham Hancock.
Yep.
One of my friends, let me give a shout out to Nikki Anna Jones. She was saying that she was recommending the show Ancient Apocalypse to one of her coworkers. And he's like, wait, I Googled them and there was like some stuff coming up about like white supremacy. I don't know if I'm into that.
Yep.
Just like that. That's how that works. And it's like, huh? So
that's exactly how that works. I've said it a number of times that most people do not care about if somebody openly misrepresents how the pyramids were built or how anything. Most people just really don't care. It's not that big of a deal.
Right.
But historians and archaeologists care. And in order to drag people into that fight, in order to get people to make their arguments effectual to Joe Q public, you just tie a little racism on there, and all of a sudden you got a lot of people who are like, "Oh, I don't even want to touch that. I don't even want to look at that. I'm just not going to give it a chance," like you just said.
Right.
And it's a scorched earth tactic that's very underhanded, but very in line with the SAA members. Sadly.
Yeah. So you've been digging into stuff. You were the guy that helped expose a lot of inaccuracies that Flint had shared. Why don't we dive into that? People are here. They want to know. So I guess we could kind of backburn the racism thing. I will tell people that, hey, they can go look at Flint's Twitter, and they'll see that he had done far more than he led on. And he, in my opinion, he lied through his teeth, trying to backtrack how he had associated Graham with racism and other things. We can backburn that for a few minutes, but let's talk about the real details involving the actual scientific data that he shared that was a vast misrepresentation of the truth. And it was done so in order to score a point at Graham's expense in front of millions of people.
It misled millions of people. And that's where I was appalled. Like, the racism thing was the first thing that clued me into he was being dishonest. When I saw that, I'm like, I know that that's a lie, sir. But when this went a little bit further, when I was watching it later, and he's talking about the plants, and he says that it takes thousands of years for plants to revert to a feral state, and that's where you've got a domesticated crop, and then it goes back to the wild. People don't tend to it for 1,000 years, and what happens to it? And it doesn't take 1,000 years for it to return to the wild, though. It happens like overnight almost. In a single generation, there's signs. And I knew that because I'd already researched it. So I started digging into that and realized that he completely misrepresented. And then Joe asked him specifically how long. And he's like, well, I don't know. And it's like, well, you shouldn't be saying that it's thousands of years then, because that's not thousands of years. Just say that you don't know and put a pin in it. But you couldn't do that and sew this shut. In his mind, he was just making this watertight case in his debate and making sure Joe saw a hole in it. Well, what about the plants reverting to a feral state? Oh, nope, 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 nope. That can't be. Shut that down right away. And he did it just almost off a knee-jerk reaction. It wasn't like that clued me in there that he was really willing to bend the truth on a scientific level, as well as not just protecting his own personal stuff in regards to the racism thing.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the ice core samples, because I think that was a profound example of a misrepresentation of the data. For example, he had stated definitively that, hey, look, here's this graph. There has been no metallurgy found in the ice core samples from the Ice Age. This would have been evidence of lost civilization. It doesn't exist. Therefore, Graham Hancock debunked. But you did some digging and you contacted a legitimate scientist who studies ice core samples personally. And why don't you share with us what that revealed? Because not everyone here has been following the Twitter
Sure.
and they're not familiar with your work. And I will tell people, as soon as they get a chance, hit subscribe on Dan's channel. It is a goldmine of awesome info.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the ice cores, Flint was very same kind of thing. He was very overarching and overreaching, even in his statement that there we can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was no large scale metallurgy in the Ice Age. And then he shows the graph that is from a paper that goes back to 1100 BC. So it's like 3,000 years of Hancock's 12,000 minimum. So it's right off the bat, it's like, okay, man, that's just kind of, this is a little sleight of hand here. Hope nobody looks at this graph. Carry on. And the reality of it is, when it comes to metallurgy in the Ice Age, they do go with lead, which is what he talked about, and they do absolutely look for that on a general sense. But there's a lot of reasons that lead can be kicked up. If there's lower there's lower sea levels due to higher glaciation levels, that will cause more dust, and that will put more lead into the ice cores. And that's the same lead. If you go dig in the ground in the Sahara and you kick up a bunch of dust, or if the wind blows real hard in the Sahara and kicks up a bunch of dust, it creates the same isotopic signature in the ice when it gets deposited there. So it's very difficult for them to differentiate between whether or not it's low-tech metallurgy. Now, modern stuff, obviously, there's all kinds of isotopes that you just don't find in nature. But when you're talking old school metallurgy, it's really difficult to distinguish. And so they don't test for metallurgy going any further back than they have an archaeological site that would tell them to test for. So when he says, we know for a fact, they haven't tested. They simply have not tested in the Ice Age for metallurgy. So it's just a lie. That's just misrepresenting the data we have.
Right. And that's exactly how he presented it, though. He had stated definitively that they had. And I guess a lot of people don't realize that when it comes to scientific testing, everything costs money. They're going to pay for some analyst, I suppose, to go through the data. And they're not just going to test for everything under the sun, because it takes time. And God knows what their hourly rates are to test for something like that. And so, but the graph, though, this is the thing. So this is why people need to watch your video, because you hammered it home so well. You got straight into it, where you show the graph, like, this is what Flint said, plays the clip, shows this graph, and then like you zoom in on the graph basically and show like, this is not in the time frame. It only went back 3,000 years. When Flint is presenting it, and like, oh, this is the heart of the Ice Age. See, nothing. That's not true. And either he didn't know it and he jumped the gun and made a mistake, which is possible, but his reaction since has been nothing but doubling down. It's like, it'd be one thing to say, okay, you know what? Thank you for the correction. I was under the impression that that's what it was, my mistake. And then he still could have covered his own butt by saying, however, you still can't show me proof that there was metal in the Ice Age. And he could save face that way and feel like he didn't lose the argument. But he's behaving in a way that is so dishonest, that it's like, okay, maybe you purposely did lie and then you got caught and now you're trying to cover it up, because anyone can make a mistake. And all you have to do is say afterwards, like, whoops, my bad. And most people, they're like, okay, they don't even care. People move on, but to anyone that isn't following, and I would encourage people to sign up for X. If you're not on there, this place is gold. Like, a lot of people don't like negative social media interactions and all that, but by and large, it's mostly positive. And this is a way of getting news and information very quickly. It's a way of engaging with people, personally. And so I recommend it. Since Elon has taken over my my account has skyrocketed. I'm making money on it
Nice.
now. I'm bringing new attention or new eyes to the details that I've been sharing for years on YouTube. So, I recommend people get on there. It's a very powerful platform that's changed dramatically, because I used to think that Twitter was a total cesspool, garbage. I had one foot out the door for years because I knew they were suppressing me and everything else. But it's changed dramatically in the last year or so.
Nice. Yeah, I'm on there for sure. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the most positive experience for me, but I get yelled at a lot ever since I got noticed.
Well, okay, so I want people to understand like the cancel culture that goes on in this archaeological realm, because like you come out of the gate, this really nice guy, you're giving credit all over. You're saying, hey, this is good here on this side. The alternatives are right on this. The archaeologists are right on this. You're wrong. Very, very neutral in a way that everyone was gravitating towards you. You have me and Graham Hancock gravitating towards you. All the archaeologists are gravitating towards you. And as soon as you called out Flint for making mistakes on that podcast, like they wanted to burn you at the stake in such a spectacular fashion that it was like, whoa, like,
yeah,
see, these people are nasty.
It was amazing to me. I knew that they were already mad at me because the Society for American Archaeology wrote that letter to Netflix, and it contained a lie in it. And I'd been calling them out on that and holding them accountable for it for a while. And Flint was one of the people whose name was on that letter. And so I'd already had some of the archaeologists that were not as nice to me as they were a month before that. But yeah, when I pointed out that he was just being dishonest at points, boy, now I'm not impartial. I'm a grifter. I mean, I have people that I haven't even met yelling about my video and calling me a grifter when they find out that I'm the one that made it. Oh, you're the grifter. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm the grifter. What?
Right.
Like you say though, like my very first Can
you hear me? Oops.
Oh, sorry.
That was my mistake. I hit the wrong button. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Sorry.
Oh,
you're calling you a grifter.
Yeah, my very first shout out was if Milo Rossi's Mini Minuteman's last Ancient Apocalypse debunking video. The beginning of that, he calls me basically the one good Graham Hancock fan. I mean, that's in his mind, like it's I've been on good. I had a good relationship with most of the people on both sides of the fence for most of the time that I've been here. But yes, this is really telling because I tried numerous times to like point out these things gently as it got to this point. But when it's one thing for these people to make these misrepresentations on Twitter, and then I say, hey, man, you need to fix this. And they don't. But when they go and they do it in front of millions of people, I mean, I checked like 2 weeks ago, it was like 4.5 million on that Joe Rogan podcast. So it's probably closer to 8 by now.
Yeah. And just so you know, that doesn't include all the views on Spotify as well as iTunes. So like most Joe Rogan episodes are averaging, the prior data was like 12 to 13 million per episode. And it's gone up since, because now that was back when he was on Spotify exclusively. But now that he's put it across the platforms with his new deal, I mean, it could put it this way, being Graham Hancock, who's one of his highest, he's a recurring guest to get some of the highest amount of views. It's fair to say that episode has at least 20 million views. And that doesn't even include all the clips that go around TikTok and all over the place, things that aren't going to be measured in that. So we're talking like a serious, sizable portion of people that have seen it.
And that's amazing, because so much of what was said, like the metallurgy in the Ice Age, this is a great example. I don't think there was metallurgy in the Ice Age. Graham Hancock doesn't think there was metallurgy in the Ice Age. Flint also doesn't think there was metallurgy in the Ice Age. But out of the three of us, one person is going to say, well, we can prove definitively they cannot. And I mean, just to be very simple about this isn't scientific. Carl Sagan has this great quote where he says, science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking. And when you see a scientist that is not employing scientific thinking, it's not a scientist anymore. This is just an ideologue in a lab coat. They're just pretending to be a scientist, but they're really putting those credentials aside or they're just using it as a stick. It's not they're not really being sciencey anymore. And that was kind of grotesque about it to me. Not just kind of, it was millions of people seeing that. And it's like debunking pseudoscience with pseudoscience. And what the hell are we doing here? What's the point?
Well, let's be real. A lot of people have said it before. Archaeologists are not scientists. It's not to say they don't use scientific approaches to things, but a lot of people that are scientists and engineers and other things, they scoff off archaeologists a lot. Now, I don't have any issue with archaeologists personally. People think I'm anti-archaeologist. I'm like, that is so far from the truth. I'm only against individual archaeologists that attack me and defame me and name call me. And then, we can go back and forth. But archaeologists, many of them kind of, I feel like they got into this field thinking that because perhaps they had parents or relatives that were archaeologists and they put it on this like pedestal and they think quite highly of it. And then they get into the real world and they see that a lot of people either don't care, which is unfortunate, or that they're not held at the level of respect that other scientific peers are. And I think it puts a chip on many of their shoulders, perhaps.
I think you're right. If you know what cultural resource management is, it's a CRM archaeology. You'll see CRM next to a lot of archaeologist profiles. Cultural resource management is kind of the grunt work of the archaeological world, and it's where most of them find their jobs. It's where, we're going to build a new mall over here before we break ground on it, send the archaeologist in and make sure we're not destroying some sites. And these are done through private corporations. It's so that there's a lot of for-profit incentives. Sometimes they're in like dangerous environments and stuff. They rarely make any fines doing this, and they're basically just paving the way for somebody else to literally come in and pave over the place. It's very unglamorous and not at all Indiana Jones. So I think that right off the bat hits a lot of them. And then what you're saying about it being, it's a soft science is the way I would describe it. It's like psychology. There's a lot of data that informs these opinions, but at the end of the day, it's a lot of opinions that, I say this frequently. I won't challenge scientists on their hard data. I will challenge the way that they interpret it if I think that they're just off in the weeds. Some guy who Flint naps all day long, if he holds up this point and says this one's Folsom, this one's Clovis, I'm not going to argue with him. But there's a point where they start extrapolating that expertise into, Flint's trying to talk about the entire globe at this point. He doesn't know anything about half of these sites, but he knows just enough to debunk Hancock.
Right. I have a really interesting example to share that is along with what you just said. Involving archaeologists going to sites before they build something, they have them come check. Just a week ago, my brother informed me of an example, which I'll share with everybody. But real quick, I have to read off my sponsor. It's the deal that I have. This is the screen that I brought up a second ago. So if people could just give me, half a second here, I'm going to read this off. Guys, I have a deal with the wellness company. I highly recommend you check them out. We've all seen how crazy and uncertain the world has become, which is why we all should take steps to be prepared. And I highly recommend purchasing an emergency medical kit from the Wellness Company, which allows you to preemptively obtain prescriptions for antibiotics such as Z-Pax and amoxicillin, as well as other drugs such as hydroxychloroquine, Tamiflu, and even ivermectin, many of which are difficult to come by, especially considering that these kits will cost you less than most visits to the doctor. The kits are only available in the United States. However, everyone that can obtain one should have at least one of these kits in their household. If we find ourselves in an emergency situation, a toothache or even a minor infection could become fatal, which is why preemptively having antibiotics on hand could literally save the life of yourself or a loved one. So head to www.twc.health/brightinsight and use promo code brightinsight today to receive 10% off plus free shipping. The link is in the description of this video and the pinned comment down below. Let me remove this. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to that. Listen, guys, anyone that's been following my channel for years knows that I've never once done a sponsorship deal. The world is becoming crazier, and I got to open up avenues to improve my own life. I want to buy some land, and so I will never, ever do a sponsorship for a company that I don't believe in. I am a prepper in nature. This is a good company. Dr. Peter McCullough, who many people are probably aware of, who exposed a lot of things involving the COVID stuff and all the things around that. So I have a respect for them, and they're the real deal, and it's a way of getting important stuff. So I just want to shout that out. So I recommend, after this podcast, people, go follow that link and see it for themselves. But as I was. So a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I'm with my dad and my brother up north at my brother's cabin. And coincidentally, one of his childhood friends is one of his neighbors. Total small world thing. And his friend is a civil engineer, and he's currently or beginning to do a decommissioning of a large coal mine somewhere in Arizona, and sharing all kinds of interesting things about it. But while my brother and him were having a conversation that my brother later relayed to me, because they were talking about me a little bit, and he was his civil engineer friend was laughing, saying that they have to bring in these archaeologists before they do the decommissioning, because they're gonna seal things up and all kinds of other things. Archaeologists have to come in there to give their 2 cents. And apparently somewhere in the conversation, he was saying, he's like, bro, seriously, no engineer takes any of these archaeologists seriously at all.
Yeah,
I thought it was funny. And this guy has no interest in ancient civilizations. It's not his thing. He was just casually mentioning, oh, those guys just get in the way. They're dumb. I thought it was kind of funny. Did we freeze up here? Are you with me, Dan?
No, just for a second. I'm back now. Can you hear me now? All right.
Yeah, I got you.
Sweet. All right.
So what's your reaction to that? Archaeologists aren't taken seriously.
Well, I think that's pretty hilarious. I mean, obviously they're an engineer's trying to do something entirely different than an archaeologist is. It's like why I mentioned the private businesses, right? Their job's to get the thing built. So the CRM guy's just kind of in the freaking way. He's just the government red tape. So they're pushing them out of the way, and they don't mind if they're in a freezing environment or there's a little toxic gases, or just hurry up and get the hell out of there.
Right.
Right. But yeah, they of course there's certain situations where I think they should be taken very seriously, but when they start getting into this overarching stuff, that's really where you're almost in the realm of historians at that point. You're almost they like to step outside of their lane quite frequently. They like to get into psychology and be like, oh yeah, we totally can weigh in on all this too. So I'm not surprised. But at the end of the day, in my mind, like, archaeology is supposed to be like you're evaluating history through material remains, right? And so once you get away from the material remains and you get into speculation, that's not really archaeology anymore, nor is it pseudo-archaeology. And I think that's an important thing to get clear. Is like when Graham Hancock is like, okay, well, I've got these material remains that I kick off from, but now I'm just going to speculate and say, well, maybe they blah, 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 blah. That's not pseudo-archaeology, man. That's called speculation. That's an entirely different thing. But they're just going to lump it all together because knee-jerk crap. I don't know why they take it as personally as they do, to be honest with you. I don't get that part of it.
Yeah. Well, I saw a comment just a moment ago. Somebody said that the reason why Flint Dibble is so nasty towards Graham is because he's jealous, because if you Google archaeology, Hancock's name will show up and Flint's won't. And honestly, I think that Flint aside, I believe that there's some truth to that, because when I saw the completely visceral reaction to Ancient Apocalypse, like, you and I had chatted over the phone, so I've shared this with you. But to anyone that wasn't in the social media space in the days leading up to Ancient Apocalypse coming out, over a year ago, what I witnessed was absurd. There was a whole band of archaeologists banding together to tell people to leave it a negative review before it had ever even aired.
Review bombing. Yeah, it's really above the board character. Isn't that stuff I thought they reserved that for like movies and songs and stuff, but
yeah.
not.
And I'm like, that's really unbecoming. And what I gathered, because I was kind of looking into different people that were very outspoken, and my conclusion was along the lines of that comment, which is that I think there's a lot of jealousy in that Graham Hancock, you got all these other university professors and archaeologists, they'll write a textbook and it'll sell a few copies, whereas Graham is an international bestseller that has sold, I don't know how many millions of copies in how many different countries and different languages, but he's been wildly successful, to say the least. In fact, he's the top dog in that field as far as eyes and ears that he's reached. Yeah. And I do believe that there's other people that are like, okay, they'll disagree with him on something, and then they take it to heart and be like, oh, well, everyone's listening to him and they're not listening to me, and I have something to share. And my mindset is like, get out of this loser mentality. And if you, go write something that's engaging, make a video or a documentary yourself that you think is better. like, stop crying about it on social media and trying to tear someone else's reputation apart just because, you know, and I think this goes back to, it's just the human characteristic, you know, people, there's a crab in the barrel type mentality.
Yep.
To anyone that's not familiar with that, it's like, go watch videos on this. Go type in crabs in a barrel, and it's remarkable because it's a real thing. That if you put a bunch of crabs in a barrel, they'll climb on top of each other to get out. But as soon as one of them gets to the top, it starts pulling itself out. They reach in and they claw it and pull it back down. And they just do it over and over and over again. It's like, well, you're not getting out if I'm not getting out. It's really messed up,
really
actually.
weird.
Crabs are real assholes. They got that look in their face. You kind of see it. They look like pricks, you know, like, all right.
That's why we cook them while they're still alive.
Yeah. Poor things. Those poor things. But yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. In my mind, they really let their egos miss a golden opportunity. I talked about this a little before, where Carl Sagan, he was a skeptical guy, but he knew that UFOs and little green men really got people interested in astronomy. He also knew there's a lot of people that have zero interest in being scientifically literate, but they're still interested in astronomy. And he cultivated that into scientific literacy, whether you freaking like it or not, buddy. You're going to learn a little science here because you just asked me a question about aliens, and I'm going to answer your question couched about aliens. And a perfect example, when you made the post about a month ago about the Nephilim and maybe being Denisovans, maybe being Neanderthal, and there was immediate pushback from all the archaeologists and friends, and it's just like, well, both of those are known to be smaller than Cro-Magnon, so how could those possibly be the Nephilim? And it's like, well, in my mind, the way to handle that would be like, you know, that's a pretty interesting idea, man. Both of those are actually a little bit smaller, but there's other hominids out there that were bigger. Maybe you should check and see if I don't think these would be the two to look for, but there's other ones out there that might be. And then they take the natural interest that you have in the Nephilim and hominids, and they turn that into you doing your own research into science. Or they shit all over it and make enemies, and then they'll cry because nobody listens to what they have to say, which is what they chose. That's consistently the path they choose.
Yeah, bro, I actually got torched to death for that. So to anyone that's not familiar or aware, I had made a Twitter post showing the size of various skulls of the Denisovans compared to Neanderthal, compared to modern day human. And it was a sincere post. I said, what if the Nephilim that are described in the Bible, because that's what it describes, is that there was a race of giants that existed. And I made the suggestion, or I proposed the idea. It was just nothing more than an idea. I was asking a question, and it was a sincere question. What if the Neanderthal or Denisovans or whoever are what they're referring to? Because they did exist at the same time at one point in Earth's past history. So I'm like, what are they describing with giants? Were they actual 15-foot tall people? Were they giants of mind, which is one thing I suggest? Were they just the big fat-headed people? You know, like, and I got viscerally attacked over this. Like, to a level, it's like, I mean, people are like, this isn't the right skull and everything, just going crazy. And I'm like, I don't understand why do you hate me for this?
It was insane. That another great example of that is your Göbekli Tepe video talking about them paving over it and putting trees on it and stuff. Just a couple of months ago, they were talking about refacing Menkare's pyramid. And Matt Simpson over at Ancient Architects, he was the first one to get on that stuff. He's got his finger on that news pulse pretty hard. And he caught that right away, brought it into the community. And almost everybody on both sides were of the same opinion. This is bullshit. Don't go refacing the Menkare's pyramid. This is stupid. Why would you do that? And it was it was like 3 or 4 days. Like, I made a video on it, and it was, by the time the video was done, it was almost already too late to make the video, right? They rolled it back immediately. But you say the same sort of thing about Göbekli Tepe, and you get John Hoop saying insanity like, well, they should just pave the whole damn thing over, and we've got enough already. And it's like, dude, two things. One, you're putting it, like I joked with you on Twitter, you could burn the whole field down. Just go ahead and say, well, why haven't you excavated more in Rome? And then watch all the archaeologists say, oh, we got enough in Rome. Well, why haven't you excavated more in Baalbek? We got enough in Baalbek. And in a year, they won't have any sites that they haven't themselves said that they've dug enough at.
Right.
It's insane. It was just insane to me to see that organized, knee-jerk react. It wasn't like they got behind the closed scenes and closed ranks. It just happened naturally. But my God, man, they were just, you said nothing that was wrong, and they acted like you were just insane. I couldn't believe it.
The reaction. So to people who aren't familiar, Professor John Hoops out of Kansas University is the original guy that Graham Hancock wanted to debate on Joe Rogan instead of Flint. John Hoops was his first choice. John Hoops has a bachelor's in archaeology from Yale and a PhD in anthropology from Harvard. And this guy has been one of Graham's biggest critics. And he refused to take part in the debate because he's a coward. Yes. But what he said in reaction to the Göbekli Tepe thing, and I shared this on social media on X as well as Instagram, he literally said that he would support them sealing it with concrete.
Yeah. Okay, what?
The whole side of Göbekli Tepe, pour concrete over it, and then we can study it later. I'm like, who? Like, what? That's insane. How could you say that? What? He wasn't joking. Like, no. This was. Yeah, the reaction out of that Göbekli Tepe thing has been interesting. I want to hear your thoughts on it, or maybe you could share your own perspective. Like, I make a video trying to advocate for further excavation of Göbekli Tepe. To anyone that hasn't watched that video, I highlighted that a small percentage of it has been excavated. And as of right now, any meaningful large-scale excavation to dig up the rest of the pillars is at an indefinite standstill because they're saving it for future generations. To be clear, I did not say, and I am not saying that excavations are still not taking place to this day. Yes, they are. However, they've built infrastructure over areas, planted trees over areas that have ruins. That in itself is preventing excavation, but it's out of their own words. One of the ministers of tourism, whatever, or antiquities out of Turkey said that it may be 150 years. This wasn't included by video. It came across that article after the fact. 150 years before they fully excavate it, which means that all of us are dead. This is equivalent to 4 generations. That means your great, 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 great grandchildren will be alive to witness it. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, Göbekli Tepe is the oldest megalithic site on Earth. Yes, you could say Karen Tepe is older, but they might be dated the same. It's kind of confusing there. But let's just go with one of the oldest, most mysterious sites on Earth that was like through this whole wrench into the whole entire mainstream narrative involving the true history of ancient civilizations, because it's supposed to be like 6,000 years ago with the Sumerians. And then you have Göbekli Tepe at 11,600 years ago, rewrites the history books based on human, civilization. And, here I am listening to Graham Hancock 7 or 8 years ago now on the Joe Rogan podcast talking about, only 5% has been excavated and how they can't wait to see what's waiting to be unearthed there, because all the pillars are seemingly telling a story or sharing something with their depictions. And so I had backburned the topic of Göbekli Tepe for a few years because I'm like, okay, let's let them dig more up and then I'll revisit this, in the future and see what they find. So I started exploring the topic again just a number of weeks ago. And then I start making connections involving this Doge's company, who's the CEO is a longtime member of the World Economic Forum. We could put aside the World Economic Forum conspiracy, just put it to the side. Never mind that for a second. Not everyone buys into it, say it's unrelated or it has no significance. Sure. Fine. But the point is this, is that they're focusing on tourism and large-scale excavations have been postponed for future generations. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, no true enthusiast of ancient history, how could they live knowing that they're going to die, not knowing what else is waiting under there? 90 to 95% of the site is still buried. Who knows what's waiting to be shown or what we'll learn from it? How could anybody tolerate this? And everyone's making every excuse in the book. Like, the trees are fine. The trees are going to protect it. The trees were buried before the World Economic Forum. Okay, yes, but the trees were planted 10 years after excavations began. There's 4 separate orchards. It covers a sizable percentage of the site. Why would you plant trees over it? And people are like, well, you don't understand it. They're olive trees. It'll increase the value of the property. I'm like, stop for a second. Like, I'm trying to advocate for excavation. So what are your thoughts on that whole fiasco?
Well, yeah, I got a few. One of them, that it's from a strategic perspective. If you sit in the archaeologist's point of view, if I'm John Hoops and I am trying to combat the narrative that archaeologists hide giant bones in the Smithsonian and all this kind of stuff, archaeologists hide data. That's my number one thing that I want to combat. Well,
Right.
this is just stupid as hell, because this is, besides the pyramids, this is the number one most popular ancient site with alternate historians. And him advocating for burying it is basically smoking gun. I'm an archaeologist that wants to hide the stuff that you want to look at. It's like you couldn't. He'll never unring that bell. He played right into everybody's hands with that. It's really dumb on their part. It shows I've said it before that these guys need a PR team worse than the Bronies do. These guys just they are so bad at internet persona. They're just bad at it.
Well, they're destroying their own field.
They are.
The
They're
world
just
is social media now. The world is social media, like it or not, and
yeah.
that's the face of it.
And they are they're ruining their own reputation. But in addition to that, the idea that we have everything we need from the site is insane. There is that site and a few others nearby, but that's the site that broke the mold, like you were saying, and rewrote the history books. It told us that if you go with the mainstream narrative, we don't need a massive surplus of agricultural foodstuffs in order to do this. We just need to be able to obtain it regularly and be able to build up a little bit of a surplus from the wild. And that was a big rewriting of history. And the massive amount of varied iconography that we see all over that site. The video just yesterday about the stolen statue from there that was stolen in like 2010 or 2014. It doesn't look like anything else at the site. They all look a little different, and that is, in and of itself, you can't make these determinations. Did they have a written language? Well, maybe this was a proto-written language, but you're going to need more than 50 symbols to figure that out. But there's all kinds of things that could be learned from further excavations. That shutting it down, in my opinion, is ridiculous. But they're not going to listen to you. The third thing that makes that really, they're not going to listen to you any more than they'll listen to Ben when he brings up information that they think is crap. He's got other stuff that's good. You bring up stuff about Gobekli Tepe that is accurate in most people's minds. We need to excavate more, but then it's you. So
Yeah.
they throw the baby out with the bathwater on all the time. The thing with Ben, like, his vases, in my opinion, they're not proof of ancient high technology, but they're certainly proof of lathes being about 2,000 years older than archaeologists give them credit for being in Egypt. That information right there makes his work invaluable in my mind, whether or not it's what he wants. But the archaeologists won't even entertain the real data that he brought because of who brought it. And it's the same thing with what you did. And that to me is grotesque, because you go back to Sir Isaac Newton. The guy was an anti-Trinitarian in the day when that would get you burned at the stake, and he believed in alchemy. If he was on social media, he would be a pariah. Nobody would listen to that math. That's that crazy racist math. You don't want nothing to do with that. That came from that Newton guy. That's how it would be. So sorry, I rambled about that, but this one kind of pisses me off.
Well, it's you said it so well. Like with the vases, like if nothing else, museums that contain these artifacts, because I'm seeing every excuse made in the book, like, well, these are from private collection. How do we know they're authentic? Whatever. It's like, all right, guys, this is very simple. Get a museum with a verified artifact, a precision vase, and 3D scan it at the museum with doctors, with the professionals, and let's see what that looks like. That's number one. So Ben brought it to the attention of millions of people. And if nothing else, if people don't want to buy into the lost technology, like you just said about the lathe, we're talking about that would predate the lathe by, I think, it'd push it back by 2,000 or 3,000 years older than it was known to exist. Is that correct?
Yeah.
If nothing else. So if nothing else, no lost technology, whatever, this in itself is a consequential detail. That itself is an actual game changer as far as known capabilities of the Egyptians, if nothing else. But because a YouTuber mentions it, people are like, just ignore it. It's like, it's because the YouTubers are doing the work for them. It's like, I'm here, YouTuber Jimmy, Rumble guy Jimmy, pushing for further excavations. Where are the archaeologists calling out for this? And then here's you. Where were all the archaeologists and various scientific, or professors of any kind fact-checking the things that Flint Dibble had shared? So you get Dan Richards of Debunking YouTube channel exposing the facts of the matter, and then they attack you. They attack me. They attack Ben. They attack anyone. So it's like, I don't know. I feel like these people, a lot of them are, and I don't want to be insulting, but it's almost like, well, I don't know how enthusiastic they are about their own professions.
No.
Maybe their paycheck isn't that much, and they're just, because you know what it is. Some people are just kind of, they get comfortable over decades, and they just want to do the 9 to 5 and go home and just turn off, not think about it, and that leaves a lot of opportunity for someone else to come in and do it better. And I think that they get extremely apprehensive when they essentially get upstaged like that. They get outshined, because it's like, why am I doing your job for you?
Yeah, well, that's that old Chinese saying that the nail that sticks up gets hit. There's that's a very strong thing that we have in the alternate history community, that the archaeologists are really, they don't. They can't, like Stefan Milo's a YouTuber, right? But if he says something, he's not creating his own idea. He's generally parroting what somebody else that has a degree and credentials said. He has to stay in his lane. If he steps out of his lane and he starts making up things or coming up with ideas that are a little bit too far out there, History for Granted's a great example. This guy is he's not, no ancient high tech, no aliens, no Atlantis, none of that shit, but he's not going to agree with the mainstream stuff. And a lot of his work is actually like really scientifically impressive and puts them to shame. And Flint Dibble himself has called him, said, well, you just keep doing your YouTube stuff. I'm going to do real archaeology. And it's like, dude, this guy went to Giza and took better pictures of the chimney and the freaking bent pyramid that had been taken since the 70s. So right. Tell me who's doing the real archaeology. You're just bad mouthing somebody on JRE. What the hell?
Yep. I was there with Ben going into that bent pyramid. They had only opened it because we were there in November, December 2020. And they had only just opened up that pyramid for the first time in decades. I forgot how many months earlier, may have been a year earlier, but like no one had been in it because of 2020, as we all remember. Yeah. And so we were among the first to really go in there with 4K cameras and document it. And that was something very special, because it's like, wow, even, John Anthony West never had the opportunity to go into the bent pyramid, and he wished he could have, which, by the way, that pyramid is bizarre. The internal layout and structure of it is incredibly wild.
Weird. Yeah. I haven't been in it, but I've seen the cross sections, and yeah, the pyramids are really interesting because there are some features that look like it was a little bit of growth and advancement here and there. And other times it's just like, man, this is entirely different. This ain't even the same language anymore, man. It's a stack of rocks. Beyond that, this is almost entirely different. It's really, really fascinating. Has been to me all my life.
Are you planning to get to Egypt?
I would love to. Now that that YouTube's starting to make it where that might actually happen, and my son's old enough now that, like I say, if I go away for a while, he'll be fine with that. So yeah, I might just. I would love to. I would love to. It's just a matter of making life work.
Right. Yeah. I bet you could get someone, because there's all these tours now. The other YouTubers are doing it. Perhaps one of them would be gracious enough to extend you an invite to where essentially you wouldn't have to pay for the ticket, take care of your airfare. But I've seen exceptions like that made for other people, where it's like, hey, come with and give us a shout out, and it's a free trip. So as you're growing, you got to take advantage of opportunities like that, because why not? And with how crazy the world's going, I've been saying this for a couple of years now. I tell everyone, I'm like, if you have any interest to do any real traveling, do it now, because times are so uncertain that, as we saw with 2020, like this, they can shut down traveling. And I don't know what's coming. Between now and the November elections, who knows?
Yeah.
This world is uncertain. The future is uncertain. A lot of people have this feeling that there's something coming, whether it's World War III, whether it's another pandemic, whether it's the unthinkable. It almost seems like the powers that be are going to shake things up. And it seems like when it comes to the airline industry, it seems like they are making plans for that to decrease again. My girlfriend is in the industry, and there's some weird stuff going on there with like long-term planning. It almost seems that they're planning. If you look at, we don't have to get in the conspiracy of it, but if you look at Agenda 2030 with the World Economic Forum, it is in their plans for air travel to be vastly reduced in the name of man-made climate change. So I'm like, people, get busy living or get busy dying. Like, if you have an impulse or desire to go see something, tomorrow is not promised. So get on it. So we got to get you to Egypt before November.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to. Yeah, there's a lot of sites that I want to see, but those three pyramids have fascinated me since I was like 11 years old. So that's
Yeah, you
yeah.
got to get inside of it because it's, to walk inside the Great Pyramid and to wonder who built it, what was life like back then, what pharaohs had stepped into it, and even in modern times, any royalty or dignitary or president or whoever, so many people have been in it, and yet it's such a small percentage of people around the world that actually do. So it's kind of like this unique thing to be able to, when you cross paths with different people in your life, be like, yeah, you've been in the Great Pyramid, me too. Oh my God, what do you think about it? It's like it's a life memory. It's a bucket list thing that you'll have forever.
Dang, yeah. Now you make me really want to go.
You gotta go. You gotta
Go.
get you
Yep.
out there. Let's see. Does anyone have any questions for us? Does anyone have any questions for Dan? People are making jokes. Flint's in the chat. You might. Hey, Flint, if you're listening, brother, like I don't hate you.
Yeah.
I could
go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, there's things that I could say that I think that you've been unfair to me, and I know you think I've been unfair to you. And this has been a lot of tit for tat. But like, I don't hate you, and I'd rather let things simmer out. Things have already been done and said, but like, what's the point? Like, I'm gonna continue doing what I'm doing. You're gonna continue doing what you're doing. Like, because in my mind, I'm thinking like he had put out a tweet talking about this live stream today. He was saying they're gonna do it. They're gonna talk about me, and so I'm thinking he's watching. And what time is it in London? 11 p.m. probably, or something like that. It's like, brother, go to bed.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything bad about you because I know what he's going to tune in for to see what we're going to say.
Yeah.
And yeah, we called you out on some of your data that wasn't completely accurate. But I don't know. I kind of want to let him off the hook.
Well, I mean, it's not my channel or my platform here, but I mean,
you have a platform.
Okay.
You have the mic, brother. Say anything
All
you
right.
want.
Don't go yelling at Flint, guys. There's no reason to go give him shitty comments about whatever. There's that accomplishes nothing. So if you bump into him somewhere, that's one thing. But don't go from here and be like, I'm just gonna go yell at that guy. It doesn't do any good, and it actually plays right into his hands because he's crying, of course, that everybody in the world is being mean to him now. So,
right.
I don't have. I like Flint. I was able to communicate well with Flint for a long time. It was only when I started pressing him on the issues of the false accusations of conflation with racism and all that crap, and when I showed him receipts that the evidence that the letter to the society from the Society of American Archaeology to Netflix, when I showed him I showed him receipts that letter is just full of shit. And he just doubled down, said it didn't matter. It's not a big deal. And at that point, it's like, well, you're calling somebody a racist for reasons that you know are wrong. So to me, that's a huge fucking deal. Excuse me, but that's a huge deal, man. That is a huge deal. So
yeah, because he's typing it out. That's the thing. He's writing it down, and it's ones and zeros that stay forever in the internet land. And it's character assassination. And again, he did it to me. Like, I share a picture of the swastika at Baalbek, and I ask a very sincere question. And he as an archaeologist should know, when you talk about the context of that symbol dating back 10,000 years and 5 continents.
Yeah.
When you consider that the Nazis themselves had embraced that symbol for whatever reason and took it on and bastardized it and reappropriated it with their own ideology, that ideology aside, they were immensely into archaeology, which is, to me, a bit of a mystery. I'm like, I want to know, were they aware of something we didn't? Like, why were they so ambitious to go dig up ancient stuff? And, to blast me as spreading disgusting Nazism. That's what he said. He's like, Corsetti's pushing Nazism, disgusting, something to that effect. And I'm like, bro, that ain't cool. Like, that's not nice. Like, don't put me in that. Like, don't do that.
Yeah,
like,
you knew he was going to do something like that, but it still shouldn't be done. It's pretty grotesque. But again, it's like I told you, that you knew it was going to happen because that's just the fucking way he is. Excuse me again. You just knew you knew it was going to happen. This is you give them something like that, and they're going to ignore all of the nuance and all the subtleties and just use the one little bit that they can complain about. It's right. Once they've decided that you're going to do the character assassination thing, they do it. I got a video coming out tomorrow. Quick plug. Nice. that goes into the SAA's bylaws and stuff and their history, and you would be surprised. they're kind of endorsed and kind of expected to do anything that's not illegal to achieve their goals. So that leaves a pretty damn wide door. Um, that's and it says anything that's not unlawful. It's like, oh, well, what? I read that and it's all worded like an academic, so it doesn't just say go out there and the ends justify the means, but it says the ends justify the means.
Yeah,
It's gross.
I have an idea of what you're going to share as we chat about offline, and it's
Mhm.
extremely interesting. Real quick, guys, Dan's link is in the description. Go subscribe to him right now. You won't regret it. To anyone that's not familiar, SAA, like that's the with science. What is it? Of Archaeology Association.
The Society for American Archaeology.
They were the people that access denied Graham Hancock from filming at the Serpent Mound during Ancient Apocalypse.
They were the ones that wrote to the tribal authorities. The tribal authorities were the ones that denied, that had the say, but the SAA is the one. The SAA is the body that does the scorched earth stuff around Hancock, period. If there's Hoops and Dibble, both are SAA members, and I wouldn't be surprised if Colavitos hangs out with them too.
Interesting. Yeah, it's like these people, it's like that is so unbecoming. Like, you know, Graham Hancock is doing them a service by bringing these sites to international attention, and for them to use their political persuasion, let's just say, to get a tribal land to prevent that it's stupid, and it's actually, you know what it is? It's wrong. That's wrong. If there's right and wrong, that's wrong. He's not doing anything to site. He has a right to go out there and look at it and film there, like anyone else. They're not going to stop Jimmy the YouTuber from going and filming there. People can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But like, you can't do that. And so I already know some of the details you're going to share, and it's actually extremely interesting. Some of these people are vicious. I mean, the historical nature of them, and even in modern times, like I just can't get over it. Like these people need to be held accountable, and by that I mean like whoever the key decision makers are, whatever their names are and their titles, it's like it should be on display. It's like these are the people that are holding back this field, because as even Flint Dibble acknowledged during the Rogan podcast, is that various museums and archaeological schools around the world are closing. And I'm like, don't you guys get it? You're destroying your own field. There's a huge interest in archaeology. Shows like Ancient Aliens, which I don't watch, but whether it's various YouTubers, whether it's Graham Hancock, you know, there's a huge emerging interest. The interest is growing into the lost mysteries of our past. And yet these people are suffocating it, you know, within the field. It's like what's that saying? Like to eat your nose despite your face.
Cut off your nose despite your face. Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. They are. There's three sciences that really grasp the public's attention: astronomy, archaeology, and paleontology. These three really get the public. They like dinosaurs. They like aliens. They like cavemen. These things really get people involved. Yep. And when the reason that it's really simple. The reason that people are into these and not geology nearly as much is because there's a mystery here. There's what I wonder what the kind of creatures existed back there. I wonder what exists out there. I wonder what our ancestors did. That wonder is what got them to be archaeologists, presumably, and it's what attracts 99.9% of the people that are into this stuff. And for them to deliberately snuff that wonder in their attempts to debunk is some of the most stupid and short-sighted stuff for a science educator to do. That I don't even know what to say about it. Carl Sagan would be slapping them back and forth for it.
Yeah, it's unreal. Let me real quick. It looks like we got some super chats here. I've missed a number. Got one from the Realist version 1 says, a lie can travel around the world faster than the truth can put its shoes on. A light from darkness shines a truthful past. Thank you for that super chat. I think that comes from Mark Twain, wasn't it? The initial part of the quote where it's like a lie can go halfway around the world. Espress, thank you for the super chat. Says thanks for exposing. If there's been any others that I've missed, forgive me. But if you guys have any, go ahead and leave them. If you have a question or comment, we are all ears. But again, like I just want to make this really clear, like, you know, because some of our adversaries, I don't have any adversaries, but some of the people who really don't like me in that field, I would say, like, you need to look at what I'm trying to do here. I am somebody, I feel like my calling is to shake things up. I love this, the mystery of wondering about our past. And it's abundantly clear to me that the true history is far different than what we were taught, that there's more to the story. Sure. The ancients were more capable than we were taught, advanced, whatever level of advanced, that's debatable. Technological, debatable, all that. but it's clearly we were older and more capable, and I would argue more globally connected than we were taught in school. And I want to find out answers. It's one of the sexiest topics in the world. When I first got into this, making videos on YouTube about this field, I didn't think for a second it would come with this much heat and negativity. Like, I'm not debating abortion here.
Yeah.
I'm not, like I'm not like getting totally political. Although people do accuse me of that on social media because I do share my political thoughts. But I'm like, come on, people, you got to speak up if you see things going wrong in the world. And this is history, actually. What's happening in the world right now is history. We're living in it right now. But yeah, so where I was going with that, I'm circling around back, with the more YouTubers and social media people that are discussing these topics, it will increase the demand in the field. And I have got emails, I've got DMs, I've had people reach out, comment saying, hey, I'm going to start studying. I was going back to school. I didn't know what I want to study. I'm going to study archaeology. So I'm like, and I've had a lot of comments saying that. I know other YouTubers have heard the same thing. And I also want to point out that, because I have a business background as far as, my college education. And I'm like, guys, you got to understand, with interest and demand comes dollars. If half the world's talking about wanting to see more excavations, I'm telling you, more excavations will happen. By me exposing things going at a slow pace at Göbekli Tepe, and a slow pace is a nice way of putting it. It's like the court of public opinion has power. Like, when enough people make a buzz on social media, it gets to certain eyes and ears, and things can happen. So I'm going to continue to shake things up.
Yeah, I can't blame you. That's exactly how it should be. As it sits right now, with that completely polarized thing, and they don't want to have the archaeologists don't want any influence at all, it seems, from the woo peddlers, or whatever you want to call us, the pyramidians. At the end of the, I love that one. I saw it in a magazine when I was a kid. It made me laugh. But at the end of the day, like Mark Lenner, if you know who he is, the Egyptologist, right? Yep. Okay. The Edgar Cayce Foundation partially put him through school. He started out as a pyramidian. He didn't start out because he saw it, the Atlantis and all that shit, right? That was when he started. Both expeditions to the Giza Plateau that did the carbon dating were financed by private individuals that were into alternate history. The Edgar Cayce Foundation in one case, and David Koch in the other. And so in these situations, you've got archaeology doesn't have the money to do the job. They need the private individuals, and the only private individuals that are into it are pyramidians or woo peddlers. And nowadays they would push these guys out of the sphere entirely. We want nothing to do with you. But just 30 years ago, 20 years ago, they knew well enough to lean on them to get those dollars. And we could do that with Göbekli Tepe. We could do that with Gunung Padang. We could do that all across the world. People could follow Graham Hancock around. And you've got a Patreon. I've got a Patreon. People donate money to this shit. It would not be hard for them to get an archaeologist that was like, I'm going to go dig where Hancock said to dig, donate some money. I guarantee that would get people on board. But they're not going to do that because that's probably career suicide for that archaeologist.
Right, which is regrettable.
It's horribly regrettable.
Hey, that's one reason why Dr. Robert Schoch, who, of course, presented possible evidence of water around the Sphinx enclosure. Behind the scenes, this isn't me spilling the beans, because Randall Carlson himself had said this on Joe Rogan a handful of years ago. He had said something to the effect of that Robert Schoch thought it could be tens of thousands of years, possibly 100,000 years worth of erosion. But professionally, he says 10,000 years, 12,000 years. And so I'm not like bus rolling the guy or anything like that. It's already been said. But that's what I'm trying to highlight here, is that professionally, because him to suggest water erosion around the Sphinx was a big deal, and he's a tenured professor, so he just wanted to commit career suicide. And so he's conservative to say, well, perhaps it's 10,000 years old. Whereas personally, he thinks it's tens of thousands of years. And it's all out of fear that, like, well, if you go that far back, that's too much that's going to shake things up too wildly. We can't entertain that. And it's unfortunate. They've weaponized, the school system, it seems to me.
Yeah, it's at a point with the clubs, the stuff, click, however you want to put it. They're so intertwined that the nail that sticks up gets beat down. They cannot. The Cave of Bones that about the home on the Delhi by I forget the archaeologist's name, the anthropologist's name, but he got hammered for it. He got just blasted for, oh, well, some of the things that he said were a little too speculative here, and some of the stuff we don't have full evidence for, and blah, blah, blah. He put had a bone sent up into to the space station and back down. That got blasted and all this stuff. And it's like, Berger, that's Lee Berger, I believe. But he's just trying to like get people's attention and stuff with keep it mysterious, keep it fun, keep it informative and scientific. He's making a damn Netflix special, not a paper, and they blast him like he's Graham Hancock for it. Not quite that bad, but really close. And I just shake my head. It's like tenure doesn't matter when social media is a thing. They just kick your ass right out of the cool kids club.
Right. Yeah, that's regrettable.
It's horrible. But what do you do, right? From the outside, we complain about it because they sure as hell ain't going to clean their own house. They're afraid to stick their necks out.
Right. So let's see. So you've made videos on Baalbek, which I'm going to go see because I'm doing my research on my video on it. What are your thoughts on Baalbek?
Well, Baalbek is, I think that one of the things that they missed right off the bat that makes me laugh is that they didn't use the Roman foot on the three big, the trilithon. Those three stones that are in the wall are not using the Roman foot. Now, that doesn't mean for sure that it's not Roman, but the three that are in the ground still do look to use the Roman foot. And just in my opinion, I think that the Romans showed up at this site and it had massive stonework already done. And that's why they built the biggest ones around, because they were all into using their construction to show their power, basically. Like we are better than your forefathers. Look at our temples. So in Baalbek, we see the biggest temples that they built, period, right? Way bigger than what they built in Rome, which is kind of weird because it's a little bit of a backwater compared to a lot of the other places. But I think they were attempting to build three more stones. They were trying to match the trilithon because the Romans were very into symmetry. And I think that they got to work on that. And as soon as the guys tasked to moving the thing showed up on the scene, they're like, what in the hell are you guys even talking about? This ain't happening. So they got left there. One got chopped a little bit. I think the trilithon came from somebody before, who I don't know. How it got there, I don't know. But I'm almost positive the Romans didn't put it there.
I feel the same way. And having visited that site, it couldn't be more clear that there's two or even three different types of stonework there. But I would say two, that the foundation stones, with how unbelievably big they are and how they pieced it together. I'll make, this is why I'm going to make a comprehensive presentation about it to show the photos that I took. But it's night and day. And what's so interesting about Baalbek is that it contains, if it's Roman, let's just say, and it contains the largest stones out of the entire Roman Empire. Why would they do so in remote Baalbek in the Lebanon mountains? Why not at Rome itself? It is so bizarre. And when I was there, I knew I was in the presence of greatness. I do believe that it is an example of a lost, ancient, advanced civilization. By advanced, again, advanced is relative. I'm saying advanced compared to what we were taught in school. But the magnitude of moving 3 individual 900-ton stones a half mile and then lifting and stacking them perfectly is a marvel of engineering in itself. And the various explanations that they've proposed or theorized to try to explain it don't add up. I've heard you discuss the Thunderstone. Will you take a moment to share your thoughts on the Thunderstone? Because I get comments all the time, people saying, you're ignoring the Thunderstone.
All right.
If they do the Thunderstone, of course they can do the Trilithon stones. And I'm like, no, all right. But explain why. You have a video where you discuss this.
Well, the first thing is the Thunderstone was they used a lot of metal involved in it, a lot more metal than a lot better metal than they would have had access to a couple thousand years ago. So
what kind of metal?
They used brass bearings, brass balls, spheres for them to roll the thing on, and they used iron for a sled and for jacks.
Kind of like a rail, almost like a rail with a sled.
Yep, and that's where the spheres were rolling on this inside of these tracks, basically, and they would move them to the front.
So,
and
real quick, just to interject, you said iron. Yep. And this was done in the late 1700s, correct? Or was it early 1800s? Okay. Iron Age culture, which is what, so it's like, well, the Romans had iron.
Sure, but well, in the late 1700s, we started building like the first iron bridge and the first iron buildings, where we were actually using structural iron and structural steel became a thing. We had advanced metallurgy to the point where we were using it to build things. So the iron we were using was vastly better. I mean, there's a whole step of a production that basically started like in the 1600s. For about 150 years before the moving of that stone, iron had really just hit this bell curve, just this massive increase in the how fast they were innovating it, how much better it was. And the same thing was to be said about brass. And they experimented quite a bit. They tried iron spheres at first and they crushed. Then they tried brass spheres and they crushed. And they had to keep changing these out. And every time this happens, they used jacks, multiple jacks, screw jacks, to raise the stone. So they were using iron and brass jacks to lift the stone to begin with. And these are things that the Romans just would not have had. We don't have any information, any evidence of them ever using a screw jack. They had a wood screw they would use for like a wine press and stuff, but no metal screw jacks or anything like that. And certainly didn't have the level of metallurgy that they used. And the Thunderstone was still really hard for them to move, really difficult. Took a lot of people. It's funny, there's a lot of different accounts, so you'll see some people be like, oh, it only took 36 people, and I said, no, it took 36 people per capstan, and they were using 4 of those. It was quite the endeavor.
How?
But the stuff, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'll have a question
Oh,
after.
sorry. Just the stuff's usually in French. All the oldest accounts I can find are in French, so that's part of the problem. Is there's a lot of translation error.
So remind the audience of how far they moved the Thunderstone and how long it took, if you remember offhand.
It's most of it was over water, but the part they moved it over land was something like 2 miles, if I remember right, and it took almost a year for them to get it from start A to point A to point B.
Exactly. So they have advanced, metallurgy, and it took them. I thought it was like 10 months, 9 months, but it was like a year. Is what I remember, like at that time frame, for 2 miles.
Yeah, not very far at all. Yeah, it was,
and it still took that long.
it
Like
was
that in
it was a
itself,
mess.
right? And so imagine ancients trying to do it with more primitive technology. It's like something's not adding up here.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely using the Thunderstone, using the Thunderstones to debunk the moving of the Trilithon is basically all you end up doing is showing what the Romans didn't have access to that they needed to, and the Russians did need. So it's probably not the best thing for guys to bring up when they're trying to debunk it. If there's a little bit of scratching the surface, and it's like all you're doing is showing me what we didn't have.
I love that you brought that up because I'm going to include that in my Baalbek video. I'm going to give you a big shout out because it's a very, very consequential detail, because that is the number one feedback I get whenever I discuss Baalbek. Like, well, come on, if they did the Thunderstone, they could do that. Nothing to see here. It's like, no. And by the way, never mind just moving a heavy object from point A to point B, but the stones at Baalbek are at least 23 feet off the ground. I had heard they were 30 feet off the ground, but then I read and I'm like, it seemed to be, I got to double check the figures. But let's just say dozens of feet off the ground. And when you're there and you saw, I have pictures, they are perfectly flush. They weren't just stacked mostly good. I mean, it's to perfection. They're even Steven. And I'm like, so when you're talking about rough limestone of such vast weight, to me, that would indicate that they didn't slide it over and even it up, but they were placed down. But even one way or the other, that in itself, you would have to have such capability to line it up so perfectly when we're talking about that type of mass. They didn't just like push it. It's like, oh, it's good. Like this was perfection.
Yeah,
it is. You got to see it up close. I believe the Trilithon stones, if I remember right, I got to double check the figures. I'll make sure they're accurate in the video, but I believe that they're 14 feet tall. Each stone itself is 14 feet, and they're like 62 or 63 feet wide. But I'm like, when you see the pictures of them, it doesn't do it justice. One, you have to take all the photos with an ultra-wide camera lens because there's a wall behind you. You can only be so far back. So to get a good photo, you got to have it on wide angle, which distorts the size.
yeah.
And when you see it with your own eyes, it's like, whoa. And here's another fun little story. the gentleman who lives in Lebanon who escorted us, I went with a friend, and it was his friend's cousin. And long story short, he had been to Baalbek 3 times over the course of his life, and this was his fourth time. He had never even heard of the Trilithon stones. He didn't even know they were there. Because so the site is interesting. It's so big. A lot of people don't understand that most of the tours that operate there don't even go back to the backside where the Trilithon stones are. So essentially, you got to walk almost a half mile to get there. It was a hike, especially because it was hot out. But no one else was there with us. 0 people the entire time that we were at the Trilithon stones for I don't know how long, a while. Nobody was with us. None of the tours take them back around there. And Dory, who was touring us around, he didn't even know about the Trilithon stones, because before we were going there, I was explaining to him over dinner the night before. I was trying to talk to him about it, and he had no idea what I was talking about. So I brought up photos, and he had never seen or heard of them before. And I thought that was very, very interesting.
That's wild. Yeah, it is really interesting.
Not even included on the tour, my friend. There was all kinds of people out there tour. Ain't none of them go back around to that Trilithon stone.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it.
No, I'm wrapping my head around it still. That's mind blowing.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
No.
And what was interesting, another tour guy came up to us while we were just kind of hanging out over the Temple of Bacchus, and he came up to us and just started chatting. And what he thinks, because I asked him, do you think this was the Romans? And he's like, no way. He said it was the Phoenicians. And I hadn't heard that before, because if you read about it, like I hadn't came across it. Had you heard about that? People speculating there was the Phoenicians?
Yeah, I mentioned it in my video a little bit.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I still haven't seen your video because I was waiting to get my other work done so that way I could start taking notes and dive straight into Baalbek. So what are your thoughts on the Phoenicians? Like, who were they?
Well, I don't think the Phoenicians are a good candidate for that, mostly because the Phoenicians built with stone and wood, and that doesn't look like anything that we know of theirs, and we don't really have a lot of their stuff that looks neat. Most of the stuff that we have of the Phoenicians looks pretty bad. They used a lot of wood, and so their buildings don't tend to stand up very well. Now, it is possible that it's Phoenician, but it would be like that's a stretch. You're basically attributing all kinds of stuff to them that we don't have any real record of them having done. But the locals may well have been saying that it's the Phoenicians forever. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about the Phoenicians. I live in Phoenix. Well, outside the burbs of Phoenix, which is kind of interesting. A couple super chats here. We got one from Chris that said another Flint Dibble incorrect point. Tried to say the Great Pyramid being scaled to the Earth is achievable with any object, and he then points out only longitude. He didn't mention latitude. Interesting. I got another one from Realist Version 1. Said it should be brought up of people looking into the electromagnetism of tuning forks with ancient civilizations like Egypt. Yeah, a lot of people, if there was some sort of lost technology, a lot of people, they talk about sound, they talk about vibration. And I've seen it. Like, you can use speakers to make a car like bounce.
Yeah, I myself am more like I've told you in the past, I usually am looking for more low-tech solutions, but there is no question that the ancients did play with sound. I don't think that they picked up big rocks with it, but I'm more on the skeptical side, as you're well aware. Right. I'm usually looking for I think that they worked with rocks for a long time, and then that we've kind of lost a lot of their technique. Well, that's clear. We've lost a lot of their technique, but I think that some of it is less amazing. I think a lot of it, if we watched them, we would just be like, it's like somebody telling you something that's like a no-brainer the first time. We just be like, oh, well, fuck, duh. But we just haven't figured it out because we don't do it. But that's my opinion.
I appreciate that. And that's one thing I love about you, Dan, is that you keep it real, and you don't buy into lost technology stuff, but you'll say it. And you say it with such tact, and I love it because like you have your own man with your own opinions, and you're I'm telling you, like, you're a bright shining star in this community because it's like you're differentiating yourself by saying, here's what I think is feasible, here's where it's not. Whereas a lot of people seem to be in camps. People seem to be in teams, like, I'm on this team or that team. And like I told you before, I'm like, well, Jimmy's on his own team because half the YouTubers out there in this realm don't like me. All the archaeologists don't like me. I'm solo. It's like I'm doing my own thing, and and plenty of people disagree with me along the way, and there's something very liberating about that, about just saying what you believe to be true. Damn whatever anyone else thinks.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And thanks. I think it's kind of funny that the camps exist so much, especially in the alternate history sphere. I
Yeah.
expect it from the academics, but it's really weird to me. I guess I can see some of it. Like there's some guys that I just look at. I'm like, man, I'm not going to touch your shit with a 10-foot pole because it's just kind of gross. But by and large, I mean, here's the thing. There's a lot of beliefs that people have that would seem stupid or ridiculous to some people, but there's also so other people might find this like extremely compelling evidence. Like when you talk about like the whole that stupid Schrodinger's cat. Some people look at that and found it as proof that all that quantum stuff was woo, and other people saw it was like, well, that's how it works. Brains are not, we're not just one human brain, and we've evolved all these different mindsets because together we kick the shit out of Mother Nature, right? But it takes that togetherness. So, like, Ben goes and takes, and he's like, man, check out this face. And he just gets all impassioned with it and runs with it. And he takes it, in my opinion, too far. But that passion gives us all of this knowledge and information that is thrown out by many. But if we just take it and look at it for a second, we advance our knowledge. So the combination of the dreamer and the skeptic working together hand in hand with respect and integrity and honesty, this gets somewhere. But when the two of them are like, well, fuck you, well, then they may as well just be non-existent, because the dreamer will get nowhere on his own and the skeptic will innovate nothing on his own. So there we are.
Yeah. Andy Nichols, you just mentioned knowledge. The most recent super chat was a gentleman, Andy Nichols, that said, I think it's a lost knowledge more than technology.
That's probably a very good way of putting it.
That's the truth too, though. Without technology or not, knowledge, whatever it was certainly lost.
Yeah,
undoubtedly.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, what other thoughts do you have? What do you want to share? What kind of things are you working on now? You're going to bust up SAA here pretty soon, which is going to be hilarious. But what else is on your radar? What other sites do you think are significant, or what's on your mind?
There's I've got an erroneous Phineas map video that'll be coming soon. One of my Patreon supporters has done a lot of work on this stuff, and when he showed it to me, I was blown away. I'm sure, as you're well aware, a lot of people show you stuff and it's like, that's cool, but I don't really know what to do with it. But this one, he showed it to me, and it's just like he's gone through and mapped, taken that map and against one of the survey maps, and just this river matches, this river matches, this river, just really nice in-depth detail that I can't wait till he's putting the last little finishing touches on his evidence, and then he's sending it all to me, and then I'm going to make a video with it. That's definitely, I'm really excited about that one because it looks pretty awesome. And in addition to that one, I've got a couple of, I'm hoping to do a road trip this summer around I live near the Scablands and Dry Falls and all that, and I'm hoping to hit a few of those places and go to the Finger Lakes that they show on Joe Rogan and stuff, and a lot of stuff Randall Carlson likes to talk about, and hope to make a couple of videos about that stuff. But a lot of it for now, I'm definitely I'm kind of focused for a minute on kind of holding the SAA accountable and guys within it. Just when my video comes out, you'll see that organization is so loosely scientific and so so heavily activist oriented that they don't deserve half the accolades and statuses that they have. They're a hot mess.
In my experience, when I was looking through the whole board of the board on SAA, like they were, because I looked these people up, they were like very woke. They were very like hard left from what I saw.
But it's even funny. They don't even do that, right? That's one of the things. The last point I make in the video is just showing how I don't want to spoil it, but I'll compare it to, like, when a guy like David Bowie died, and then like you go on Marketplace for the next 6 months, and what used to be the $2 greatest hits CD is now like at $30, and at the bottom of it says R.I.P. David Bowie. That's exactly what they do with like Black Lives Matter and stuff. It's just gross. It's just like, you've got to be fucking kidding me, you guys?
Right.
This has nothing to do with anything. But that hashtag's trending. we're on board. Look at this. Nothing.
Yep.
It's just gross.
That's the thing with the online stuff now. A lot of people, more than they're looking for attention and for likes, and it's like a brief little dopamine rush, and so they just chase whatever the next thing is, and that's what they do. They just jump on it like, oh, a bunch of other people are talking about it. I need to too.
Yep.
And it's very predictable.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of nice actually seeing that happen with the Flint Dibble misleading everybody on the debate. It's kind of amazing people that I've never even saw before, and they're like, "Yeah, did you see it when Flint Dibble blah 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 blah?" And I was like, "Oh shit, that's kind of nice that this is gaining some traction because I mean, there's like millions, 20 million eyeballs that we have to unsee. So it'd be nice if a few million people saw it along the way."
Yeah. I got a super chat here from Robbie V. It says, Jimmy, 2 children were said to witness Ed Lee Scallon, I forget his name, of Coral Castle, claiming to have used ice cream cones and lift the megalith of coral in place while a sound was made. Look at the dendera and the cones. I got to look into that. What are your thoughts on Coral Castle? That's something I have never dived deep in because in my mind, I'm thinking like, okay, this guy dies with the technology, never shares it, whatever. I'm like, was this just a grift? He just wanted to feel special. Like, I don't know. Like, because he didn't document how he did it. He kept it a secret, correct?
No, yeah. There's some witnesses that saw weird stuff like that. We know for a fact that he had like these homemade big DC motors. They were big, but big copper windings around big wooden spools that he would use this to move stuff. But it's weird. I haven't dug a whole lot into it, but I've looked into it a little bit. But when I saw that he was using electricity and stuff there, it was like, well, obviously he's kind of blending things a little bit. But the coolest eyewitness account to me was the people that were tasked with moving when he relocated the castle, and the guys that were the movers, they said that they would back up the truck and he would tell them to turn around, and then when they would turn back around, the stone would be on the truck. And that was like, well, there's not a whole lot of a reason for them to lie about this, and this is kind of weird. So it's one that I would like to dig into more, but it's unfortunate that it's one of those things there's so much. Even the contemporary accounts they disagree with each other. From what I've seen, the newspaper accounts and stuff argue with each other and all that. So it can be really difficult to dig into anything. Try digging into Jimmy Corsetti right now and tell me if he's a white nationalist or not, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's the way shit goes, right? So
Jimmy spent 5 minutes in his last video talking about the swastika spreading Nazism. I very specifically stated twice in the video, like all modern ideology and evil villain, all that stuff aside, prehistoric symbol, 5 continents. Like, let's talk about that for just a half a second. I would like to know your thoughts on it, because it's like that symbol dates back to North America at least 2,200 years ago, possibly 2,500 years ago, from the Hopewell Mound people of modern day Ohio, of course, the Southwest United States, the Pima Indians, the Navajo, the Yavapai, to name a few. As far away as Alaska with I'm not going to say it right, the Tinglet, it's like TGL. I'm going to misspell it. Forgive me. But anyway, as far away as Alaska, and then even in remote places like Bali, dating back 1,000 years ago. And of course, Peru and various places in Europe and Africa and Asia. And yet we're taught 1492 is when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue and transoceanic sea travel wasn't possible till then. Is that symbol, never mind what its origins were, what it means, and certainly never mind its modern context, is that not suggestive evidence that that people in the distant past were traversing the earth in a way that is not known today?
It definitely suggests it. I mean, the shared iconography is one of the earliest things that people have got onto with these kinds of things. Now, obviously, when you talk about the swastika, there's like a huge swath of people that are just going to, and they're right that the symbol's used for racism. So I guess we should just say that so that everybody can ignore this part when they soundbite, make it a little harder for them to selectively edit this conversation. But it's clearly was used for racist crap at that point. But the fact that you see it all over the world now, you can argue that maybe it cropped up on its own, but it's not a cross. It's a cross that, like, I speculate, and I'm not the only one, that like the symbol is a archaeoastronomical. It's based on our astronomy. It's their cardinal directions, and the lines moving off are basically the passage of time. This is your cardinal directions, and this is to signify these cardinal directions turning over time. It's a windmill, right? You could see it that way as a. So I personally think that's where it might have had its origins, and there's a good chance that it's. I think that the whole idea of the non-oceanic travel is just they use that stuff so ridiculously that I have a hard time even we know that Neanderthal traveled around in the ocean. We know that there's people all over the place. We know that there's rats all over the place. We know there's monkeys all over the place. There's all kinds of things. And yes, there are places that are isolated, but there are also places that things have been shared and that the bloodlines have not been isolated that long with specific species. And humans are one of them. So I definitely think that there is shared iconography all over the planet that we're going to see from. I do believe in a lost civilization. I don't think that it was like super high technology or anything, but I definitely like there's another image you see a lot of, the one with the girl with the two serpents in her hand. You see this kind of this iconography shows up more often and in more places than it should. The guys with the stupid Easter Islands with their hands on their stomach, their navel holding. It's minor, but why is that where their hands are fucking everywhere? It's not just one or two places, all over. So I think that unfortunately the swastika is the one that, if it's the most ubiquitous, it seems, but it's also the most taboo to discuss.
It is. You can't touch it. I stayed away from it for years.
Yeah.
I'm like, I kept backburning and I'm like, oh, I'll dig into it later. And Baalbek really inspired me because I'm like, well, this site appears to me an example of a lost civilization. And that symbol is just everywhere. I'm like, I can't ignore this. Like, this has to be said. And I know where my heart is. And if people want to accuse me of associating with Nazism, like, they're dumb and they're wrong. And they're only doing it to try to destroy me. Like,
that's exactly right.
So fuck them.
Yeah.
I'm not stopping. Go to hell,
Exactly.
Get over it.
It's one of the funniest things about this stuff is their double standards. I'll give you a great example of this with discussing the Nazis. You talk about the Nazis and the ancient technology or ancient aliens or archaeology, or they found Atlantean tech or whatever. There's all that kind of conspiracy theory or whatever. And if you say that, well, the Nazis learned how to build V-2 rockets and jets from ancient aliens. They got it from aliens. Well, now you're playing into the Nazis' propaganda. You are a Nazi supporter. But if you say that the Egyptians got the help to build the pyramids from aliens, now you're stripping away the credit from the Egyptians and saying that they needed aliens to build it. So it just depends on the exact same scenario. But if you're saying about Nazis, well, now you're a racist. If you say it about Egyptians, well, now you're a racist. It doesn't matter which direction you say it. It's the double standards apply. So they're going to call you a racist no matter what you do at this point.
Listen, the ancient Egypt, let me drop some truth bombs on y'all right now. I shared the swastika that's been found in a couple different places around Egypt that I'm aware of. I know it's definitely at Dendera. I got pictures of it myself. Estimated around 3,300 years old, maybe 3,200. The Egyptians were Nazis.
Yep, there was.
We got to cancel them out. I don't want any more talk about the ancient Egyptians. They're disgusting.
And if you want some supporting evidence, just read Exodus.
Yeah. Oh, real quick, shout out to David Sig Hansen with the super chat. Do you know David Sig Hansen, Dan?
I do.
He's the guy. He went to Mauritania twice to visit the Rishat structure. He's awesome. I've met him a few times. He's great. He just went to the Sage Wall in Montana. Looks like he left a super chat about it. Can't wait to catch up with you, Dave. I want to know what his thoughts are about it. The Sage Wall is a place that I want to go visit and see with my own eyes.
Me too.
He was saying he went out there and he's like, I think this is something. I don't want to put words in his mouth. We haven't chatted over the phone about it yet. Rishat 3 times. Sorry, David. 3 times. Oh my God. Yeah, the Sage Wall is an interesting one.
Yeah, I saw Wandering Wolf's video on that a year or so ago, and it's close enough to me. It's one of the ones I would like to check out. I just slowly start the traveling and eventually hope to get to Egypt.
Yeah, you bet. Let's see here. Anything else we want to share? I don't want to keep you too long. It's Saturday evening. I might order the UFC fight. We'll see.
Oh,
do you watch any of that stuff?
I haven't for a while, but I used to a lot. When it first came out, I watched it a lot. But as it started getting more refined, I found it less interesting.
I like watch it when there was no holds bar,
In the early days when it was like a Tank was one of the guys, and like in the first UFC, the one guy, I forget his name, but he was a jiu-jitsu fighter, and they grappled for a minute, and the referee broke him up, and he just laid there on the ground like, come on. Very different than the submission and quick elbows that we see nowadays. Yeah, Liddell really changed it. I did watch a few of his fights. I was like, damn, that's crazy. But yeah, it changed a lot. After those first few years were really rough.
Yeah. Well, I think now's a good time to stop. Is there anything else you want to share? Let me just say to anybody, go hit the subscribe button on Dan's channel, Didunker, right now. The link is in the description. Go there. And if you're on X, follow him there as well. You'll be very pleased with his work, and I can't wait because you're just starting. Like, I feel like you're just getting into this. I feel like you're just getting warmed up. I mean, how long ago was your first video?
Like April of last year. So a little over, like a year and 3 months, something like that.
Yeah, that's new. Yeah, a year's nothing. So I can't wait to see where this goes for you.
Well, thanks, Jim. I really appreciate the shout out and the support and stuff. But it's in all honesty, it's nice that what I'm doing here isn't very flashy. It feels like holding Flint's mistruths to the fire is not the same as talking about the cool rocks at Baalbek. I mean, just straight up, it's not as much fun. But when I first showed up in this community, nobody was doing that. Like Emperor Tiger Star had a video that had been out for almost 2 years on fingerprints of the gods, and it was so full of holes that, like, when I debunked it, he saw my video and he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna just private mine. I'm sorry, I screwed this one up." But it just sat there for 2 years. Nobody gave a shit. It had hundreds of thousands of views, so it wasn't like it was just obscure in a corner. So I feel like this needs done. So it's really nice to have people help get this going, because nobody's looking for Flint Dibble lies like they're looking for Baalbek. So I appreciate the support there.
Yeah. Let me just read off one. I don't want to miss a super chat here.
Yeah.
I get Ninja 007. All inventions and anything that takes money or power away from those in charge are well secured, either in the Vatican vaults or a secret government underground facility. Ask Tesla. You know what's interesting is that this is one thing that people really should consider. Is that, well, first of all, I do think that the Vatican has knowledge that we're not aware of. There's something weird about the Vatican, but people should entertain the possibility, because they'll say, well, where's the evidence of lost technology? Guys, it's 2024 and people have been doing things for not just years, but decades and hundreds of years. And it is entirely possible that something was found long ago and has been secured either privately or in some sort of government facility. It is possible, because I find it really weird. Like, for example, the Jed pillar from Egypt. In my mind, I see that thing. I'm like, I don't think that represents Osiris's backbone. I'm like, I don't buy into that story. And it shows them presenting it and handing it over, they show it. And I'm like, this big thing with the coils. It looks so interesting. I'm like, what if that itself was a technological device of some kind? Because it's interesting. They never found any of them, right? There's no been Jed pillar that's been found, but it clearly shows them holding it. It looks like it's got antennas at the top. Not everyone's going to buy into that, but like, what if something like that had been found? I'm not going to say we'll never know, but it is possible. But that's just conjecture. That's conspiracy.
But there's what you're hitting on some really important points there. Like in South America, there's those, I believe it's the mochi pots. And there was one guy who collected a bunch of them. And when he passed away, his wife donated all of his specimens to the museum. And he had all of the certain style. There were none of the specific style that he had were known to exist. He had them all. And it's just pottery, right? But you extrapolate that into other things. I mean, that statue at Göbekli Tepe was stolen, right? Well, it wasn't stolen to end up in somebody's garden, man. That statue ended up in somebody's house, and it cost a lot of money. And there's a lot of people that are waiting for things like this. I'll guarantee you that people that go to dig in the ground and stuff, and that are at higher positions, Zahi Hawass types and stuff, are going to get contacted about this sort of thing. I'll give you a great example in real history. When the French Revolution happened, the French had the French blue, which is now the Hope Diamond, they're pretty sure. It was the biggest blue diamond known to exist. When King Louis was getting his head chopped off, there were thieves in there stealing the crown jewels to get that. And some people think it was a crime of opportunity. I'm almost certain that there was some rich dude that was waiting for that moment. I want that fucking gem right there. Soon as they get those guys out of there, you go, and that's with that shit all across the board. I don't think we would even have the Antikythera mechanism in the record if it didn't take them X-raying it to figure out what it was.
Yeah, there's no doubt. When you look at the actual facts involving the black market for antiquities, for example, I know that just the mummy trade in itself is estimated at a few billion with a B dollars a year. That's a source I'm citing. It's a mainstream source. They were talking about this a number of years ago, and they estimated that it was between, I think, was it between 2 and 4 billion and whatever it was, but say a couple to a few billion. And that's just what they're aware of. These are rich people that probably have their basement lined with, artifacts. They bring their rich friends down there. They drink their brandy and giggle about, oh, look at this here. Look at this mummy, and like, look at this, artifact, and that's a real thing. People are into this.
Yeah. And ancient high technology, if you were to find it, just positing that it would exist, say, but a dendera light is a great example because everybody knows what that is, or supposed to be. If a dendera light was found in the record, now it would be the oldest known light bulb by thousands of years, right? Well, why is Action Comics #1 worth millions when Batman Detective Comics #1 is only worth tens of thousands? Well, this is the very first superhero ever. That's the way collectors' minds work. What is the very first appearance of? What is the very first blah? That's what they want. The very first Harley Davidson is worth way more than the third one, and that I don't have to even research it to know that that's going to be the case. That's a collector mindset. And so when you take these antiquitarians or the people that collect that stuff that are rich as sin, owning the oldest of all of those kinds of things is going to be a high priority. And if the very first superhero comic book can attract millions of dollars, just imagine what the very first light bulb coming out of Egypt could attract.
It would be priceless. It would be, imagine that people would fight over that. If there was, let's just per se that there was a lost technology, whether it's a light bulb or some sort of device for lifting stone, whatever it is, something spectacular.
Sure.
Can you imagine the powers that be that would be fighting over that? Whether it's billionaires trying to get in their collection, or whether it's intelligence agencies, whether it's various governments, they would be. I mean, can you imagine?
Oh man, and imagine, no matter how above the board, no matter how great the scruples of the person doing the dig was, unless he was filthy fucking rich, it would not matter, because they're going to throw life-changing money at you, dude. You've got morals up to here, well, they got money up to there.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. Like I don't want to say, I don't know for sure, but I would be very surprised if Zahi Hawass hasn't dipped his pen in that ink a few times, right? I mean, that's easy money there. It's easy money.
Don't forget what he was implicated of. With those Germans that went in there, and those artifacts that got missing. Was it the Osiris place, or what was it? I forgot the location.
I forget, but I know that he assisted the artifacts in illegally leaving the country.
Right. So that wasn't. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Why? And God knows how.
I figured we talked shit about enough archaeologists. I didn't want to talk shit about him.
Yeah. Good old Zahi Hawass.
Oh God.
Well, on that note, you want to wrap this up? You got anything else?
No, right. I really appreciate this, Jim. Thank you.
It was fun. Let's definitely do it again. I think we could have a lot of casual conversations about different topics and have a good time. Again, follow Dan Dedunking. One word, Dedunking is his channel. Link is in the description. Follow him on X as well. And one last shout out to the sponsor. Go to www.twc.health/Bright Insight. Guys, shit could hit the fan, and having prescription drugs can save your life. Like, it is something I genuinely believe in. It's an intelligent decision to have. So I just wanted to plug that one more time. But
way better than NFTs.
Yeah. All right, brother. I had a lot of fun. And hey, everyone, happy Saturday. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry we didn't get to more comments, but this was blowing up on both. And by the way, someone made a comment like, I'm seeing Jimmy smile as you read the comments. And I was going back and forth from YouTube and Rumble, reading different things. And some funny, we got some great people in the comments.
I'll have to go through and look. I've just been paying attention to our convo. This is my first live stream like this, so I'm not used to following the chat with that.
Oh, it could be fun. You got to look for trolls. People will like spam bomb and stuff like that. We didn't have anything too bad in this one, but
good.
All right, brother. Well, hey, have
awesome.
a great rest of your weekend, and let's chat again soon.
Will do. Thanks again, Jim. Take care.
All right, you bet. Bye, everybody.